So let me switch the video there. So if someone is strong, to build their bench press, they wouldn't need to use a barbell as often. It would actually probably be beneficial for them to use a barbell less often so they don't get repetitive joint issues. They would also waive underload and overload and normal loading movements. So they wouldn't want to overload all the time with reverse banding because it'll beat the shit out of their shoulders and elbows. So sometimes they're going to band from the bottom, which is an underload. Maybe they'll just do straight regular weight with slowed eccentrics and slowed like maybe isometric pauses and whatnot. That's a variable of an underload. So they would vary the way that they would perform the exercise to allow that some workouts it feels really hard even though it's lightweight. And they would use isolations more often in their programming. So maybe in their workout, they would bench twice a week, once with a barbell and once with just a lot of dumbbells. Maybe with the barbell, every other week they do band overload from the top, every other week they do banded from the bottom. And maybe their accessories are dumbbell flies, skull crushers, tricep press downs, cable crossovers, things like that, rather than more presses and compound movements like dumbbell presses and dips. So that would be an example of bench press variances. So if someone's weak, their programming and exercise selection should look very different than someone who's strong, even though they both have the goal of building their bench press. The second thing we have is growing muscle tissues. That's the second example. If someone is weak and they want to build a muscle, okay, they're going to lift it more frequently. They're going to use compound exercises rather than isolations, and they're going to use heavy-based techniques like rest pause rather than drop sets. So say they want to build, let's go with the bigger butt, okay? So they want to do increased frequency. So maybe they'll train their glutes 4 times a week. Compound movements would be like walking lunges, deficit lunges, hip thrusts, rather than like glute kickbacks and frog pumps, okay? And heavy-based techniques means maybe they're going to do some maybe RDLs with maybe 6 sets of 4, rather than 3 sets of 10. So that's a heavier based technique, the heavier based set and rep style. So that's going to allow them to use heavier weight and cause more damage into that tissue rather than lightweight and just going for a pump all the time, which is limited in its development. Can you use a pump techniques to build a butt? Yes, you can. But if you mix pump with heavy stuff, you will build a bigger butt. Now, what about somebody who's strong? So we would want to control their frequency for recovery, meaning if they train too often, they won't recover. They'll either get like small aches and pains in their joints, and or they just simply won't grow well because they're not eating and sleeping enough to support the amount of muscle damage. So they might create so much damage that their body can barely get back to what it was before the damage, let alone actually build upon it and repair above that damage. So often when I have somebody wanting to get bigger and they're a decent level of strength, I have to tell them to train less often. Remember, when you're in the gym, you're just tearing down the muscle. It's when you go home and you eat and you sleep is when your muscle builds. So if you're tearing down at a rate larger than what you can go home and build, then you need to slow down and have less frequent sessions of training, okay? So they're also going to use techniques of isolation and pre-exhaust, so that way they can really beat up just the muscle they want, not cause collateral damage and annoy the crap out of other stuff. And they're going to use a mix of heavy and high volume techniques. So maybe they'll do some sets with 20 to 30 seconds of time or attention, but they'll also do some sets with, say, 40 to 60 seconds of time or attention. Whereas if somebody's weak, they don't really need 40 to 60 seconds of time or attention, they need heavy stuff. So there is a brief overview, and I know 35 minutes isn't brief, but you can see how in 35 minutes we've touched on a lot of things, but we've just touched on the surface of them. So if you're listening to this and you find this interesting and you want to know more, please email us, tell us specifically or have a couple questions about what you think you'd like to know more about, and we'll make an additional podcast on that, okay? So your strength level absolutely 1,000,000% determines how your training should look. This is why I say all the time that people who get programming help from coaches, your program should look different than everybody else. You need to have a personalized program. If you're paying for personalized programming, your workouts should look different than the other people paying that same coach. You might use similar exercises, but maybe you use them in different orders and different sets and different reps. Okay? But something should be different. If your program is the exact same as the other person's, and you are paying for what you believe to be personalized programming, that coach is bullshitting you. Fire the coach, go get somebody better. Okay? Now, if you're paying pennies and you're paying for a general program, well, then you got what you paid for. Okay? So don't get mad at the coach. So that's what we want to look at. Okay? So use some of this information, apply it to your training, try to find more ways to personalize your training so you can maximize the effects of your efforts and you can get better results. Okay? Cool. If you like this podcast, please share it with family and friends. The more people we help, the happier the world will be. Also, if you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Brutal Iron Gym. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. This podcast is for you, so I know what you want to learn about. And you can tell us on our email at brutaliron@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.